change makers, and welcome to The Core, sponsored by Red Apple & This is your Everything Education podcast. We talk about current events, books to read. We interview education leaders, hear their stories, learn from their biggest lessons, and they share what they wish you knew about what it means to be in education today. I'm your host, Dr. Kia Turner. Buckle up for small seeds of inspiration that can lead to big changes in your classroom practice. Let's take a bite out of today's guest. This week, we are talking about inclusion. And in fact, I'm calling this week's series Inclusion 101, the foundation that you need to make your classroom welcoming for everybody. And if you know me, you know that I love me a good resource, honey. I am not the carrier of all knowledge. So this week we have a ton of different people on the show who are going to share their knowledge of how to make classrooms work for all kids. Today, I happen to be talking to Katie, who is behind the Calm Classroom account on Instagram. Welcome to the show, Katie.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Katie has been a classroom teacher for 3 years, but in education for like 5 years, and went out there on Instagram, at least here in the Midwest. Okay, so don't shake your heads at me. But those of you who are in the Midwest, you know, she actually went out there on Instagram and was like, I'm really into mindfulness. I'm really into helping students center themselves. And I'm going to start posting about that. Like, who would have thought Instagram was a place where teachers could find community? So many of you are on teacher Twitter, but you may not necessarily have picked up this platform. And so what I admire about Katie is not only that she's kind of put together so many resources that she has a Teachers Pay Teacher store for, more on that later, but also that she kind of went into this space and was like, I think you all need to know too. It's pretty phenomenal. So Katie, tell us, what is it that brought you into kind of this space in education?
So I was first kind of drawn to the whole world, like alternative discipline and mindfulness, because I did my student teaching in a very, very difficult school. It was in South Central Los Angeles, and
all right,
I had about 35 students per classroom, and it was just really tough. And there was a lot of behavioral issues, and I was in middle school, hormones are raging, all that. And so I realized that my students really just were not responding to the teacher of record because she was yelling a lot, and her management was very just traditional by the book. Yeah. And the kids just weren't responding to it. They didn't really respect her. They were mean to her. And so when I actually sat down with some of these kids, they started kind of sharing things about their lives and their homes, and it became very apparent that they just needed somebody to hear them. And so that's kind of when I started looking into restorative justice. That was kind of my segue into that world. And so we started doing like talking circles, and we created some classroom agreements. And when kids had a say in the classroom and they were able to share their story, I realized they were giving a lot more respect and they were more involved in the class, and it just ran much better. And so when I was doing my master's program and getting my credential, I started doing some research into mindfulness, and I knew that I wanted to implement these in my classroom from the very beginning. And so that's what I did. And I personally am someone who is also a little bit high anxiety. And so for me, like just stepping out and taking some deep breaths has always been very helpful. And I realized it's not enough just for some kids to say, okay, calm down, take a deep breath. Like they need a specific guide. They need something or somebody to model that for them. And when I started doing that with kids, a lot of times it was just as simple as that. You know, they just needed a moment alone in a safe place where they could breathe.
How did you get into restorative justice? Like, I mean, not for nothing. I know that was around at least here for like half a second, right? Just 2 seconds and it was gone. And then suddenly we were on to mindfulness. But I'm just like, what was it during that sort of student teaching experience or what have you that made you say, let me think of another way to approach managing this classroom? And I ask because, and y'all know, so many teachers that I talk to are like, look, the kids just don't want to be here. They just don't listen. They just don't care. I was talking to, never mind, but I just had this conversation with teachers recently What is it that led you to restorative justice? What caused you, I guess, to look at your teacher of records practice, right? And say, I want to do something different, as opposed to looking at that same practice and saying, these kids just don't want to be here. They just don't want to learn. They just don't want to listen. What made you say, let me try another approach?
So I actually started for my master's thesis on basically tackling student behavior in the classroom. That's the topic I selected just because I realized it was such an issue. And it really was just kind of the research that I did. I started seeing this term restorative justice pop up in different articles and books that I was reading. And my project was about creating kind of an accountability system in the classroom. And so I started pulling kids out of the classroom and actually asking them questions about like their home life and what was causing them to respond to situations in a certain way. And they were very forthcoming.
Wow.
That was really eye-opening. So I was like, wow, these kids have a lot to say. Like I pulled them out for these 10-minute interviews. Some of them lasted 40 minutes because they just had so much they wanted to share. They wanted to be heard. And so I suggested to the teacher of record, let's maybe try to have a talking circle where every student gets an opportunity to speak, to answer a few questions about, what's going on in the classroom and what they want in the classroom. And it was amazing because they had all of these different ideas. And a lot of them we were able to implement. And then they have the sense of ownership in the classroom, right? Because they feel like they were part of the rule building process.
Yeah.
So that's what kind of led me to that.
Wow. Honey, you took that master's degree and you were like, I'm going to learn everything I can learn. And I respect that, honey. No shade and no shame. Much respect. Much respect, because teaching, I always say, is something that can break your heart, depending on how you approach it, right? So you can either look at the situation that you are in and say, I wonder if there's another lever I could pull here. Or it can completely break your heart and you can say, I'm not going to be able to do the work I set out to do here. And then that, it's how you get, in my opinion, teachers who end up deciding to take on other professions. So tell us what caused you then. So we heard about your master's thesis. How did you get from master's thesis to let me push out all of that I'm learning via Instagram? How we get to the social media?
So it kind of was just a random thing I just decided to create one day. I started creating some breathing exercises that I wanted to use with my students for the upcoming school year. Because previously I was just downloading them from Teachers Pay Teachers or copying some things that I'd seen online. But I found myself adapting them constantly to make them simpler so kids could access them. So I was making these cards and I started thinking like, I might as well share this. I'm doing it anyway. So I started sharing them, and then all of a sudden, all of these people start hopping on and asking me if I can upload a resource they can download. And it honestly has been the growth of this account has blown my mind.
The account is the Calm Classroom. P.S. on Instagram, Katie is the Calm Classroom with an underscore at the end. That's the account that she's talking about with this rapid growth. I just went to sleep and woke up and people were like, yes, I need these. But you know what? It is. We were talking before the show started, y'all, teachers do not know what they do not know. That's why Katie's here. They do not know what levers to pull. And unless you're doing the deep research she was doing, okay, and how many of us are? No shade, no shame, friends. No shade and no shame. But unless you just happen to be doing that kind of research, you don't even know what's out there. And so, of course, they love this ready resource, accessible. I can find you. You're on my smartphone. I can use it. You know what I mean? Snaps to you for not being a learning hoarder, okay? And saying, I know all of these things and I don't want to share it with you. And for just reaching out to other teachers and being like, hey, if you want to use this, this is something I've done. And then she got so good at it that she has a Teachers Pay Teachers store. And the link is in her Instagram profile. I'm also going to put it in the show notes. But when we're done, if you guys are like, man, I need to see what the hype is about and what Katie is offering to people, you definitely need to check that out. Because how many of y'all are on Teachers Pay Teachers all the time? I'll wait. I know you are, friends. I know you are. And there's nothing wrong with that. But at least you know that this is something you can use to help your students to grab a hold of themselves, or maybe even to help you grab a hold of you, honey, because some days it's just us. So tell us, now that you're the teacher of record, you've done your research, you interviewed the kids, you found out what was working, you set up the store, you got your Instagram account done came up and whatnot. What does this look like in your classroom? What does this look like in practice?
So
this mindfulness. Girl, no teacher life is perfect. We know.
Oh, yeah. No, definitely not perfect. It takes a lot of trial and error. Some exercises work really well with my kids. Some don't. I still post them up just in case it might work for a different setting. My kids really like the ones that are interactive. So usually I implement these exercises when they come in from some high energy activity like PE, lunge.
Amen. Yes. Yes.
Because they're bouncing off the walls. So I usually have the lights off. They already know when they come in that they are not supposed to talk. I usually have some soft music playing. They'll usually put their head down, or I'll have something on the board for them to look at or kind of identify things, something simple. And after about 2 minutes, I'll bring them all together and then I'll post up one of these exercises. And I'll have them, the one they really like to do all the time is the back-to-back breathing one that I've posted up. They like to sit back and feel each other kind of breathing. And at first it's a lot of giggles and they didn't want to be partnered with certain people and, you know, all the drama that comes along with the middle school classroom.
Lord, yes.
But now they've gotten in the habit of it. So they know exactly where to go. They find their comfortable place in the classroom. Some like to sit on the floor. Some like to sit kind of just like at their seat. But it helps. It helps them kind of sit and have their mind quiet and really focus on a deep breath, because I don't always know what happened out at lunch, but there's always something, you know, it's like today we had a food fight. So I brought them in and we had, you know, a few more deep breaths than usual, but it helps just kind of bring them back to that level they need to be at for, you know, a calm classroom environment.
How did you get started doing this? I'm thinking Kung Fu Panda level 0, right? I freaking love that movie. Anyway, like when the thing bobs back and hits him in the face, it's like, we found level 0. I'm like, hashtag my life. So it's like it's what it's like to start every single thing. You're like, oh God, this thing that should be simple is a lot more difficult than I thought. How do you, if you're walking in, get a new group of students acclimated to the way that you do class?
So the first week, you know, it's always just learning. New routines, procedures does not go smoothly all the time. But
no, never.
I usually try to front load a lot of this stuff because they do find it to be unsettling or just kind of uncomfortable because they're not used to it. There's a lot of giggling that goes on. So I try to get a lot of that out the first week. So I do this like repeatedly. Like we'll do an activity, we'll do a breathing exercise. We'll do an activity, we'll do a mindfulness exercise. But I think just like over time, they just get used to it and then they actually ask for it. Like there's times when the class is really loud and I'll have a kid say, Miss, can you do one of those things where we have to sit? And I was like, yeah, sure, we can do that. It is getting pretty loud in here.
Yeah. I love that. Okay, so tell us 2 tips for teachers then. Okay, because I'm sorry, y'all. I know normally it's quick, but I heart Katie in capital letters. Okay, and so I had to follow and ask questions while I got her, honey. What are 2 things teachers who have not done the work you've done learning about this, 2 easy things they can do to help their classes refocus when it is going down? It's after lunch on a Friday before a holiday break, honey. How are we? What are 2 tips to help classes refocus without the teachers having had all of the exposure you've had?
Yeah, so something really simple, and I've shown a couple other teachers at my school too that had issues with just really like loud classrooms, is this as simple as turning the lights off and putting some quiet music on and posting something on the board for kids to do physically. So for me, I'll say, head down on your desk, hold your pencil with the point facing up, put your backpack under your left foot. And, you know, it's something like that it doesn't really matter what it is, but it gets them to focus on something else that's not their reality that they left behind at lunch or recess. So that just kind of resets them. And once you have their attention, it's really easy then to, you don't have to do a mindfulness or breathing exercise that you lead yourself. They have tons of them on like the Calm app and Headspace, and you can play stories for kids to listen to. And that's just super simple. Those apps are free for teachers and you can just press play. It's not going to be perfect every time. There's always going to be kids that speak out or just are uncomfortable, but over time, the kids, they start to like it.
I like that there could be even a story playing. You know what I mean? We always talk about how to get those literacy skills in there, right? And having them even listen to what maybe they might not have said and read word for word can be definitely helpful. And I love your idea that there's soft music playing. I think that teachers miss the boat all the time with that completely silent classroom. Nobody can live like that. Like, who are these people? Whereas, like, everything needs to be completely silent for an hour, okay, while we all work, have no interaction with one another, sit silently, work silently, take notes. Adults can't do that for 8 hours at a stretch, but we ask 12-year-olds to. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. I love that you're like, put some soft music on. Yes. You know what I mean? I like the turning the lights off. I think that's a good thing. So I heard teachers need to help students focus on something else. They do that. So y'all taking notes, take them. Teachers can help students focus on something else. They can do that by kids come in crazy, loud, and excited. You have the lights off, you have soft music playing, and you have some simple directions for them to do on the board that require they focus to get it done, though, right? I think that's awesome. What's one more thing teachers can do? So, okay, they can try that. You got one tool in your bag. What's one more thing?
So another thing that I've found to be very helpful is actually teaching kids about different emotions. So actually teaching them like what happy looks like, what angry looks like, what sad looks like. And this seems like something that would be obvious, but a lot of kids don't have this like breadth of knowledge about varying nuanced emotions. They just are like, oh, I'm happy. Oh, I'm mad. That's it.
Yes. Lord Jesus. Like there's only two, honey. There's only two emotions. We don't feel things in between.
Oh, yeah. So sometimes when kids are actually able to say, oh, I'm irritated. Oh, I'm really tired.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that they're mad. It doesn't mean anything other than that. And so if we teach them like to identify that emotion and then strategies to address each emotion, then they will start to do that independently without us even asking. So if a kid is able to identify, I am really annoyed with my neighbor right now. Instead of acting out, if we teach them to take some deep breaths or maybe come to their teacher and express what that emotion is, we can then redirect them into something that's productive, that's going to help them process that.
I love that. I was listening to a podcast and there was a woman who did like emoji flip books. So basically you flipped it to the feeling you had and you could sit that on your desk and that would be like, back up. I don't want to be around you right now. Or I'm open for friendship, you know, smiley emoji. And just that being a way for kids to be like, I do feel like people or I don't feel like any of the people today.
Yeah, there's tons of good resources out there right now for that. Like all of the emojis, I've seen some like really awesome things teachers are doing with the emojis. There's this account on Teachers Pay Teachers that I get a ton of social emotional resources from called Wholehearted School Counseling. And she has all the different faces. And you can actually teach students which face matches which emotion, what that looks like, what you can do to address that. Even just as simple as little clips from like Inside Out. There's so many good resources out there right now to teach kids what this looks like or what these different emotions look like and how to deal with it.
I love that. Katie, you have been an amazing guest. I'm so glad that you made the time for this. Is there anything else you want us to know before I tell them that you have a Teachers Pay Teacher store and that they need to go check all of your things out?
Oh, thank you so much. Just like try anything because like for different teachers, different things are going to work. Not everything I post works in my classroom, but it might work in yours. And if something doesn't work, don't be discouraged. It takes a lot of practice for kids to get into the habit of being mindful and taking deep breaths and being comfortable with quiet. And yeah, just keep trying whatever you can. And yeah, it's going to help.
Thank you so much, Katie. You are absolutely right. And I hope you guys took away her top 2 tips. The first one being, if kids come in and they're kind of rowdy, because, you know, I like to summarize, y'all. I'm chatty. If kids come in kind of rowdy, or you know they're going to at that time of day, turn the lights down, have soft music playing, and have your students have some simple directions they need to follow that they're going to have to pay attention to that kind of brings their mind back to what you're doing. The second thing would be for you to make sure that you are discussing emotions in your class. And no matter the age, there's a ton of resources for that. Katie got some. And then she said that her favorite Teachers Pay Teacher store, okay, so you can know some of the source, is a Wholehearted School Counseling. And I'll put the link to that in the show notes as well. Make sure that you're using emojis, using movies, using video clips or whatever, songs, anything you can find to help kids understand it's okay to have a range of emotions and that your classroom is a safe place for that to happen. And so, Katie, again, you are thebomb.com. You guys go to her Teachers Pay Teachers store. It is The Calm Classroom. Follow her on Instagram. She is The Calm Classroom with the underscore at the end on IG, and ask Katie all of your questions. Because look, you see, she answers her DMs. That's how we got together. So you can DM her questions. She's cool like that. She's a fellow teacher. That's all I have for this episode, Fire Starters. Go forth, be great, and stay lit. That's all we have for today. Thank you for listening to The Core. Wherever you are listening to us, be sure to like our show, subscribe, and share the episode that's meant the most to you. We appreciate every single one of our subscribers, as do our sponsors. We look forward to seeing you next week. You can also check us out on YouTube at Red Apple Edco if you'd like to see more video of these conversations. We have them posted there.